Ay ay die die ay ay dee die die. Ay 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 die ay ay dee die ay ay dee die die. Ay ay dee die ay ay dee die die. Dee dee dee. Hoy 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 die. Ay, 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 dee, die, dee, die, die. Ay, 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 dee, die, dee, die, 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 die. Ay, ay, die, die, ay, 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 dee, die, die. Ay, 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 dee, die, die. Feel like singing a lot today. Good Shabbos, almost everybody. Thank you for joining us. This little shir here on the Sfas Emes hopefully will provide us some inspiration for not just this Shabbos, but for always. We're in Parsha Vayigash. We're discussing a mimer, a Torah that the Sfas Emes told over when he was in 5631, the very beginning of when he became Rebbe. At the end of this Torah portion, Yosef famously, it's last week's Torah portion, Yosef famously framed his younger brother Benjamin. And we won't go into the whole account. You can look that up in your Torah. And he decides he's going to, as a punishment, he's going to keep Binyamin as a servant, and the rest of the brothers are able to go. And at the beginning of this week's Parsha, this week's Torah portion, Yehuda tries to convince Yosef, says, take me. Take me. Yehuda says, take me. Let my youngest brother Binyamin go back to his father. And then he recounts the sequence of events from the brothers' initial encounter with Yosef until now. And let's remind ourselves what happened. Yosef is still in disguise as an Egyptian ruler. The brothers have no idea that he's alive and that he's a powerful Egyptian ruler, and they think they're dealing with an Egyptian. There are many questions that we could have about this little conversation. And one of them that the Sfas Emes points out, why is Yehuda bothering to recount all this information, which is already known? Yosef knows this information. So what's the point? And the Torah does not go into any kind of repetition just for repetition's sake. There's got to be a reason why. So one of the ways we look at this will help us understand a different way to serve God between Yosef and Yehuda. Not all ways of serving God is the same. The Sfas Emes in another place, later on in the second speech that he gave that Shabbos, mentions an idea that his grandfather said, that Yosef and Yehuda are archetypes of different kinds of tzaddikim. Yosef was completely dedicated to God, and so he wasn't really bothered by, or I should say, he was He wasn't as attached to the mundane things that happen every day. Yosef saw godliness in everything, and in everything physical, he saw the godliness in it. And the Sfas Emes says that Yosef represents, actually, he's the archetype of that element, which is that God is hidden. Now, that's one aspect of godliness, the hidden aspect. For example, nature, right? You look out, beautiful, gorgeous sunset, but you see them every week, every night, wherever you live, you see them all the time. One can forget the source of all this beauty. So that's hidden godliness. And Yosef, says the Sfas Emes tells us, represents this kind of hidden godliness. And of course, it makes sense insofar as Yosef is literally hidden, right? He is in disguise. The brothers think they're dealing with an Egyptian. Now, Yehuda, on the other hand, he saw the revealed holiness in mundane things. So if you look at the end of the Torah, in Deuteronomy, the Torah tells us about Yehuda. May God hear Yehuda's voice and bring him to his people. So Yehuda was engaged in bringing God to the people. Now, back to this idea of two archetypes of tzaddikim. There are tzaddikim, there are righteous leaders. Well, tzaddik doesn't have to be a leader, but there are righteous individuals who do not have many followers. And the reason for this kind of tzaddik is because they're so removed from the world around them that they're not looking to gain adherence. That doesn't provide them anything. That's not their mission. And this apparently was Yosef's approach. There are other tzaddikim who have many, many, many followers, and their work is to influence as many people as possible. So they want to attract followers. So that is the second type of tzaddik, a tzaddik who is trying to bring holiness into the mundane, bringing God to his people. That's represented by Yehuda. Yosef is represented, and we might say in contemporary terms, like the scholar, right, who is so absorbed in his study and his work, and it's so important, but yet it is really not accessible to most people. So now, what did Yehuda gain by this repetition of all the events which led up to the situation that we find ourselves in? That Binyamin is going to be held as a servant in Yosef's court, that he's going to be separated from his father, just like Yosef was separated from his father against his will. Why rehash all these things? The sage explains, the Jewish people are called Yehudim. How do you say Jew in Hebrew? Yehudim. Now, you could say Ivriim, and that is used in a few places. But when we refer to ourselves, we call ourselves Yehudim. We are Jews. And it's after Judah. The name Yehuda, Judah, comes from the word hoda'ah, which means thanks, but also is admission. Jews are Yehudim because we thank God for everything large and small. We know that everything comes from Hashem. Everything comes from God. Yehuda understood that everything, even the most difficult situations, are from God. And he knew that to be saved, to seek his resolution to this problem that he's in, if he needed to approach Yosef on his own terms, on Yosef's terms, on that level, he needed to approach Yosef. And Yosef, who represented godliness hidden in the world, right? So he raised himself up to the level of being a tzaddik like Yosef by repeating the sequence of events and accepting that every step of the way was actually from God, that God was hidden in all of these things. The hidden godliness within the events was revealed. That's what Judah was doing. That's what Yehuda was doing. He was revealing the hidden aspects of godliness in everything that happened up until then. The immediately following Yehuda's argument, right? Because this was an argument. He was making the case for him being imprisoned and not Binyamin. And it was at that moment that Yosef was no longer able to contain himself. And that's when he revealed himself to his brothers. Right when the godliness of what had happened was revealed, that is when Yosef could no longer contain himself and had to reveal himself too. There is a Musar Haskell, there is a beautiful lesson that we can learn ourselves today from this episode. Right? This might seem something so removed. We're talking about things which happened thousands of years ago. Well, a couple of things come to mind. Even if you think that you caused the mistakes that got you into the situation where you were, right? The Yosef's brothers blame themselves for this whole predicament of Binyamin being kept as a prisoner. They blame themselves. When a person realizes that God is the life force behind the predicament and asks God for help, then he will be assisted and answered. To recap, right? We get ourselves into problems through choices that we make, and then we blame ourselves for those problems, forgetting that God is behind all of those things. God led us into these steps, and the same way God can lead us out of those problems. And I also want to harken back to the other idea And it's a big idea about these archetypes of tzaddikim. Because I don't hold fast to the idea that there's an either or an or. I believe that there are different times when we are a Yosef, and there are different times when we are Yehuda. There are different times when we are able to perceive things, the godliness in the hiddenness, and there are other times where we're much more in touch with the godliness in the mundane, and that is okay. One doesn't have to be an either or. One can be a both. They're both our spiritual ancestors. May we all be blessed to see the godliness in all of our mistakes and predicaments. May we also be blessed to see the godliness in all of the mundane, the obvious, the revealed things. And let that inspire us to serve our Creator with more love and passion. Wishing you all a beautiful Shabbos.